All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Snook. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, so I am from Exeter, New Hampshire. Man, I love that guy, Tom. He's an incredible dude. He 6 years ago used to drive me to meetings when I had no license from all the DWIs I got. Oh man, I love you, buddy. Um, yeah, so you'll have to excuse my voice. I just got done um, coming back from NHSCYPAA, the New Hampshire State Conference of Young People in AA, and it's actually where Chris ended up asking me to speak. So thank you. I feel blessed every time I get asked to speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My sober date is 10/6/2016. Not the first time I got sober. I started going to young people meetings back in 2011 and went to my first conference in 2012. And I absolutely love those. Those are a very, very imperative part of my sobriety nowadays. You know, I ended up getting sober, and for the first 6 months, I ended up, getting a lot of recovery. I ended up going through the steps very rapidly when I first was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. But there was a lot of fellowship missing in my program at first, and it wasn't until I ended up finding AA conferences is when I really started to feel that unity, and I felt that bond, and I learned how to have a lot of fun in sobriety, which was pretty important to me. Because if I wasn't having fun, I'd probably still be out there right now. So what it was like for me, how long do I have, Chris? Do I have about 15 to 20 minutes, you said?
Yeah, 15 to 20.
15 to 20, okay. So just to give you a little background, just so I can qualify real quick to let you know that I should be, in fact, sitting here speaking to you. I got my first CWI when I was 16, my second one when I was 17, my third one when I was 18. Everybody called me the Red Rooster growing up. I was the I was the Red Rooster. The red part is because obviously because I have red hair, as you can see that. The rooster is because at every single party growing up, I was wide awake at 5 o'clock yelling "woo," keeping everybody else up. Like that's how I liked to party. And once I found alcohol, that was my solution. It allowed me to fit in. It did everything that my higher power does for me today, right? It gave me that ease and comfort. It allowed me to be okay with me. It gave me this sense of relief. It allowed me to be amongst all of you people, and all of a sudden I felt like I could actually do life, and I ran with that for many years. Until obviously alcohol stopped working for me, and then I started substituting other higher powers in its place. When I was 18 years old, I was given an ultimatum by the judge and told me that I could either join the United States military or I could go to big boy jail this time, is what he called it. And I decided to join the military, and so I went into the United States Navy, and there I couldn't buy myself alcohol because I was only 18 years old, and I couldn't drug the way I wanted to because I was getting random whiz quizzes from my commanding officers. And so me and my buddies, we came up with this brilliant idea that, because we heard from someone, if you drank enough cough syrup, you could actually get drunk off the stuff. And so me and my buddy, we go to the local NEX on the end of the base, and we buy all these boxes. I mean, it was a ridiculous amount of cough syrup that we ended up buying. And I remember I'm carrying these boxes of Robitussin back to the barracks and ripping into these boxes and slugging the stuff down, right? It was so thick and syrupy going down my throat, and it tasted awful. But you know what? Like, an hour later, all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And I was walking around the Navy Yard with my full dress blues uniform on, and I thought people were coming out of the woods and following me, and I was looking over my shoulder, and I was ducking with my shoulders all hunched up. And yeah, I mean, come to find out, drinking a copious amount of cough syrup doesn't get you drunk. It actually makes you trip balls really, really hard. And so there I go, off and running. And I like to tell that story because for me, in doing the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and looking at the inventory in my life, looking back and realizing that it didn't matter what substance it was that I was putting into my body, as long as it was something allowing me to not be me, right? To take me out of my own skin, even just momentarily. And that all comes down to self-centered fear. That's exactly where it originates for me. I was running my life consistently on self-centered fear. And I was making a lot of poor choices. I was ending up in and out of incarceration. I ended up getting kicked out of the United States Navy for alcoholism. I lived my life from the age of 23 to 27 in and out of incarceration. I just couldn't stop drinking. The second to last time I was locked up in Rockingham County Correctional Facility is when I had my first step experience. I got a letter from home saying that my best friend I had grown up with, his parents came home Father's Day morning to cook their son breakfast, and they found him face down on the kitchen floor, and his whole entire face was blue, and he had died from an overdose, and I would have been right there with him. But I was locked up at the time, so I did what the big book talks about. I swore off completely. That's it. I'm done. I don't want to drink. I don't want to drug. I don't want to die. I knew that's exactly where I was heading. And so upon being released that time, within 24 hours, I was drunk. And by the end of the week, I was doing outside issues all over again, right? Without my permission. And that's right then and there, I knew I was doomed. I knew that something was not going to be okay, and that I was probably going to die an alcoholic death. I didn't have a first defense against this thing. That's what the big book tells me. And so my PO ended up bringing me right back to county jail, and in jail this time, I was absolutely blessed to be able to do a 28-day rehab program right on G block of the county jail I was at. And that program saved my life. You know, we were doing all the standard things that happens in rehabs, right? We were doing the talking about coping skills and relapse prevention and talking about all of my feelings, right? And we were watching these Scared Straight videos. But what really, really got my attention this time was people like you on this meeting, coming in on your own free time, doing commitments to that jail and telling me that I didn't have to live like that anymore. And I believed you. This is the first time I actually had a little bit of hope, because this one gentleman ended up coming into the jail, and he told me, I'll never forget this. He looked me dead in the eyes and he said, I can show you the way out of this because somebody showed me, and I can show you too. Right? And that's the first time I ever got a little, just a glimmer of hope. And upon getting released this time, right, instead of picking up the same old playgrounds, the same old playmates, I did everything I did everything differently, right? I latched on to this one guy who had what I wanted, and I just walked in his footsteps. I didn't have to come up with this big elaborate plan or this scheme on how I was going to keep myself sober. I had tried that never worked. I just did exactly what this dude did, and I started the steps right away. I started getting into uh, into commitments. I was constantly, twice a week, I was going into hospitals to bring commitments, and I was, I went through the steps. I started bringing other people through the steps and saw the light start coming back to their eyes. And I got myself back into school. That's one thing that addiction ended up taking away from me, right? My alcoholism just ripped away all these values, my health, my education, my friends, my family, any type of relationships. And so I ended up getting those things back, and I got myself back into school. And I spoke about Tom earlier. Tom would drive me up to school every I don't know, like Tuesday and Thursday, and we'd end up going up there, and I started getting an education again, and I started getting these relationships again back in my life that really I never had to begin with, right? All my relationships before were all faulty, and they were all like expectations on each other. Well, these relationships I now had in my life were beautiful. All they wanted to know was that I was going to be okay, right? Like I had never had that before, and so I kept doing the school thing, and I eventually ended up getting myself a master's degree. I became a clinician, and I got out there and I started helping others. I finally, after 5 DWIs, I finally got my license back, and I'm picking up newcomers and I'm bringing them to meetings, and I was on fire, and I didn't think that there was a life out there like the one that I had obtained. And so after 5 years of sobriety, and having everything that I could possibly want in the world, I started resting on my laurels. And if you've ever heard this analogy, I started working the steps backwards, right? 12 step went out the window. I was no longer working with others and giving things away freely. I was now getting paid as a clinician to sit behind a desk and work with other addicts and alcoholics, but I was justified. I was rationalized and thinking, well, I'm still working with addicts every single day, but I wasn't giving it away freely. So there goes my 12 step. I started praying. I stopped praying and meditating, because who has time for that? I stopped taking daily inventory, and when I stopped taking daily inventory, I stopped becoming to blame for all of the things that were happening in my life, right? I started blaming everybody else again. And when I start doing that, of course, I don't need to make any amends. And you can see how I just started going right through the steps, right? And like, what does this have to do with me going out and drinking again? Well, working these steps backwards and all of a sudden getting down to step one and taking my own will back, my own power back, thinking that my life is manageable because of me. Well, there goes my first defense, right? That first defense that I never had all those years living in and out of jail. Well, I threw that defense away. I no longer had that. And I went back out drinking like that. And it only took me about 3 months being out there to become absolutely broken again. Within 3 months, I ended up going to 3 different jails, 4 hospitals, got Narcaned back to life twice, in and out of 3 detoxes, and put my car into a guardrail and a partridge in a pear tree. And this happened very, very quickly because my disease had been progressing and getting stronger throughout those 5 years I was sober. And I think I'm running out of time here, so I do want to touch briefly about some of the things that I was doing to maintain my sobriety before I had stopped doing. And one of those things was that same jail that I had gotten sober at previously, Rockingham County Corrections. Well, once I got a year sober back in 2012, I started bringing in a hospital, an H&I commitment into that jail to speak to the same 28-day rehab program that I got sober. And I did it once a month, and I did it religiously for 3.5 years. And as soon as I stopped showing up there and freely giving the message of Alcoholics Anonymous away, within 2 months of stopping that commitment, I had relapsed. And 2 months later after that, I had ended up back at that jail as an inmate, right? Like, is that odd or is that God? And another crazy thing that happened to me was, as a clinician, I worked at several different treatment centers after I got my graduate degree, and I would always have this Narcan kit on my desk for all of the clients that I had been working with, right, suffering from alcoholism. And I thank God I never had to use it on any of the clients that I was working with. However, when I relapsed and I went back out there, that same Narcan kit was used on me by my own mother, right? Now there's a lot of irony in that, but I can tell you exactly what had happened. I had this conscious separation from my higher power, right? Just like I can have a conscious connection with my higher power by having that vital spiritual experience, I can have a conscious separation, and that's exactly what had happened with me. And I can tell you, it is extremely difficult trying to get back into Alcoholics Anonymous. The weight of all that shame and all that guilt, it is so difficult. And I feel blessed to even be alive, to be able to sit here and talk to everyone right now, because most of the people that I see go back out don't make it back in. And they're out there living a life of suffering until they end up meeting a terrible alcoholic death. So I feel absolutely blessed. And so with the last couple of minutes, I just want to say that the things that I'm doing nowadays is I'm getting back to the fundamentals, right? I'm getting back to the basics. Trust God, clean house, help others. What that looks like for me is I started about a year and a half ago, starting to do a big book step study, right? And I'm going through the longest inventory I've ever written, because I have no idea what resentment is going to kill me. I have no idea which fear is going to separate me from my fellows and from my higher power. And so I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing, and I'm currently not sponsoring anybody. That's because I'm still working on me, and I'm still trying to work out all the kinks in my sobriety. But the beautiful thing is I get to do commitments. I get to share this message of love and joy and redemption, and I get to try and help as many people as I can. And every time I'm asked to share a message, I never say no, because AA was always there for me. When I came back in, people were waiting there with open arms waiting for me. And I love the beauty of the 12 steps and what it can do to me in my life, because all of these old ideas, these old beliefs, this terrible perception, or this perspective that I had on the world, I'm able to go through the steps, and I'm able to start removing a lot of that junk, those old beliefs and those old ideas. It's just a constant process of letting all of this junk go, right? So what I'm left with afterwards is a beautiful part of myself, because to be able to drink and drug for all those years, I started believing in a lot of terrible stuff: lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating. A lot of these character defects that I brought upon myself. Well, I need to do my best to try and let those go, because that's the kind of stuff that causes other people harm. It causes me harm, and when I'm causing harm in my life, that's a great way for me to go pick up a drink again to try and deal with it. And so I try and purify myself. I love the analogy of the 12 steps as a way that you make gold, right? You take this raw gold and you put it in a vat and you heat it up, and in doing so, all of the garbage rises to the top, and you're then able to remove all of that garbage, and what you're left with afterwards is pure gold. And that's the way I view my recovery nowadays. Is I'm trying to purify myself the best I can so that I can have the closest connection to my higher power I possibly can have, and that way I can be of maximum service to my fellows. Whew, I hope that was enough. Chris, thank you so much for having me speak tonight. I love you, bud. Tom, I love you, brother, and thank you very much for allowing me to be on this meeting with you guys. This is my first time doing this 5D stuff, and I absolutely love it. So thank you.